My name is Esther Carlson. If you are visiting my channel for the first time, welcome. I do some videos on teaching English online, and I'm beginning to do some on apologetic type topics as well. And hopefully someday I will do some travel vlogs. If you are interested in any future videos, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little notification bell. But today I wanted to talk about Jesus and His Majesty and His Love. Being Easter weekend, this is something I blogged about years ago, and I'm going to repurpose this blog because, well, I don't think many people read blogs these days, and perhaps this will be encouragement. It'll give some insight to somebody, and I also have been thinking a lot about Jesus' humanity. Like, Jesus was 100% God, and yet He was 100% man, and at my darkest times, I think that has really been a source of encouragement to me. I remember one time I had just moved from one country to another, and I was just really struggling. I was dealing with depression. I was just feeling, I guess, betrayed by friends, whether or not, it was imagined or not. I still felt just so down. And I remember one thing that just brought me such comfort was just realizing Jesus, who came to earth, He is God, right? He's one person of the Trinity. He came to earth, took on human flesh, and He suffered betrayal. And so as we are approaching on Easter's tomorrow, we're reading the story leading up to, the great day of Easter, Jesus' resurrection, and just the pain He endured. And so, I just encourage you, if you haven't read one of the Gospels, to read through that and explore it for yourself. Some have said that it isn't fair for God to force some random person to die for our sins. But Christian doctrine teaches us that Jesus is God, so it's not a random person, but rather God is paying for our sins Himself. A good analogy is that of a son who steals from his father's business. After he goes and wastes all the money, he comes back to his father and asks for his forgiveness. So the father can forgive him, but it is not settled until the accounts have been balanced. If the father chooses to, he can forgive his son's debt. According to Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death, and in God's mercy, He died on our behalf, balancing the accounts. So through the cross, God is both just and justifier of those who have faith in Jesus. We believe that Jesus took on human form in the fullest sense of the word. Otherwise, He couldn't be the perfect sacrifice for us humans. In no way, though, do we believe that somehow a man became God. But would God really take on flesh and come to earth as a human? I know He could. After all, He is all-powerful, and He can do anything that is logically possible. But would God stoop that low and still be worthy of worship? Not only coming to live among us, but humiliating Himself on the Roman cross? So regarding the incarnation, philosopher Richard Schumacher writes, "There seems no moral objection to the idea that God would be willing to act in self-sacrificial love if it was a perfectly loving thing to do, and He was the only person who had the power to act. The principle of serving self-sacrificially when others are in a serious predicament and you are the only person capable of acting, is both morally sensible and morally admirable." He illustrates this by sharing about the highly respected doctor Matthew Lukiwa, not sure how you say his last name, who came to the attention of the world during the Ebola outbreak in Uganda in 2000. He himself died from Ebola, but his quick action probably saved hundreds or thousands of lives. So the self-sacrifice of Dr. Lukiwa was unquestionably morally admirable because it was the act of love, and he was the only one qualified to act. Christians believe that the doctrine of the incarnation is similarly morally admirable because it describes the way in which God, because of His love for humanity, was willing to suffer the humiliation of the cross in order to save humanity from its enslavement to sin. So Schumacher later points to Philippians 2:6-11, and then he states, "This song reveals how the early Christians saw the humiliation of the incarnation not as an embarrassment for God, but as an act that deserves even greater praise and worship. Why? They saw the size of the astonishing gulf between Jesus' heavenly throne of glory and His earthly cross of humiliation, as providing some sense of the depth of God's love for us. In this song, Christians are offering the highest possible praise because the second person of the Trinity was willing to go incredibly far in rescuing us from the perilous situation our sin had us in. Shumek talks about how amazing Dr. Likua was. He was earning the highest marks in his class. He had earned all these scholarships and to these prestigious medical schools. But he says here, this greatness makes his act of humble self-sacrifice even more praiseworthy, for he had so much to give up. His glory is magnified by the fact that he did not consider his high status, stability, and knowledge something to cling tightly to for his own sake. In fact, when you think about all our various heroes in our different cultures, is not what they all have in common the fact that they are self-sacrificial? And why is it that this is such a huge part of how we view our heroes? Perhaps it is because we are made in the image of a God who is himself self-sacrificial. Christian apologist David Wood says it really well at the end of his video. I will also leave the link below. How can God die? So at the end of this video, he says this. He realizes this notion of God's love might be hard for some to understand. And then near the end, he states, suppose you were king of the world, dressed in royal robes. One day, your servants are carrying you around when you look and see that your child is drowning in a pool of mud. Wouldn't you throw your robe aside and dive right into the mud to save the child you love? Would it matter to you that you are king of the world? No. All that would matter is your child. If that's how great your love is, how much greater do you think God's love is? Enough to enter creation and accept the punishment his children deserve? And lastly, I wanted to read a quote by Abdu Murray. It also sums this notion up really well. And this is from his book, Apocalypse Later, Why the Gospel of Peace Must Trump the Politics of Prophecy in the Middle East. It's an amazing book. If you haven't read it, please check it out. So he says this, to believe that God would not or could not willingly subject himself to the cross does far worse than limit his majesty. It limits his compassion. It is his limitless majesty that causes us to be created. It is his limitless compassion that causes us to be redeemed. I hope this was of interest or of comfort to someone, and I pray you and your family have an amazing Easter. Until next time, peace.
Yeah.